Hello, my name is Art. I am a member of the 1st Allied Airborne Army World War II reenacting group based in Charlotte, North Carolina. My purpose for this video today is to share with you some of my experiences in regards to reenacting in terms of reloading blanks for your firearms. As you know, World War II reenacting can be a rather expensive hobby, and attending a tactical over the weekend, depending on the weapon you may be using, you may go through several hundred rounds, and at somewhere between $45 and $50 per hundred, that can get pretty pricey. So because I am a shooting enthusiast, I live fire all of my World War II weapons as well as several other firearms that I have several years ago gotten into reloading my own ammo. And I figured the next logical step would be to get the proper things that I need in order to load my own blanks. Now, what we're going to demonstrate today is reloading 30-06 rounds for the 1903 Springfield, for the M1 Garand, and also they can be used for any other firearm that takes the 30-06 round. We do have the capabilities to do M1 carbine, 45 ACP, and all those take different sets of dies, and I'll share some information with you on those, some specific things to be aware of, and where to get all the things that you need to get started. What I'm going to do is initially start off and show you some of the basic components that you're going to need in order to begin the reloading process. The first thing and most important thing that you're going to need is a press. This is a Lee Precision Challenger press. This is a single station press, and of course, depending on your budget, you can certainly invest in a turret press or even a fully automatic press. But this one fits my needs. I don't do a lot all at one time, maybe 100 or 200 rounds at a time, and so this fits my needs. One thing I do like about this press is the fact that it comes with a bushing system that you can put on all the dies that allows you to set the dies where you need them as far as the proper setting, and then remove them from the press without having to change the setting. So basically this bushing remains with the individual die, and you place it into the press, and there's a button in front, and just rotate it until the button snaps up and you have installed that particular tool. So I find that quite handy. I don't know that any of the other press manufacturers offer that feature, but I do like that about this. So you will need the press, you will need a set of dies. I have purchased the Lee reloading dies for 30-06 Springfield, and this is for reloading live fire ammo as well, although we won't be using all the dies that are in the set in order to do blanks. Really all we need to do is use this particular one, which is the decapping and sizing die, which depending on what brass you use, you can purchase new brass. However, that kind of eliminates the cost savings of doing your own. I live fire my own, collect the brass, and then reuse that brass to reload for my own. So the major expense is, of course, buying the initial ammo, but being able to reload the spent brass drops the cost down to pennies a load. So what this tool does is it actually knocks the old primer out of the spent cartridge, resizes the cartridge, and prepares it for loading the powder and the new primer. The other tool that we will need is from CH Tool and Die. This is the crimp die. This actually has a special insert that puts the rose crimp on the brass after you have loaded the primer and the powder. You will need a primer tool. This is to load the primers into the cases after they've been cleaned and prepped, sized and decapped. You will of course need, for the 30-06 large rifle primers, I use CCI. You can use any brand that you like. The way things are nowadays, whatever you can find, get them, because primers and powder are the most difficult components to find these days. Powder. I use red dot powder. In order to get the blanks to work properly, you need to use a fast burning powder. Red dot is one of the top 10 fastest burning powders that are made. There are some others that you can use. I use red dot for the simple reason that I also use red dot when I load my 45 ACP live rounds. So it keeps me from having to buy multiple different powders. Some of you might ask why not use the powder that's used in the live round. The reason is because you need to have an immediate ignition and a loud bang for the blank to be effective in what we do. I have 4895, which is what's normally used when loading 30-06, and I've actually done some experimentation with that, and it does not ignite properly, and it does not make the report that we're looking for in a blank round. So red dot is my choice. You can experiment with some others, but this is what we'll be using today. I have a universal reloading tray, which I use to keep my brass in order and help me keep a good flow of reloading. One of the most important things is we're dealing with explosives here, we're dealing with powder, we're dealing with primers, and you want to make sure you don't get mixed up while you're doing the process and miss a process or do a process twice. So I use this tray and go row by row to make sure I do everything in the proper order. I also have a Lee powder dispenser. I have preset this for the load that I use, which is 12 grains of red dot powder, and I simply load the powder into this and use that to dispense the 12 grain load into each cartridge. And in order to make sure that we have the proper load at the beginning, I will use this scale to measure the load that the dispenser is throwing to make sure we are at 12 grains. The first thing we need to do, though, is we need to prep our cases. So I have a coffee can full of spent rounds, which we will begin to prepare to reload. The first thing we want to do is we want to tumble these in a simple tabletop tumbler with some corn cob, and basically that cleans the brass, makes it ready for use. And so we will do that now. Okay, the first step in our reloading process is to prepare our brass. We need to clean it, so I've taken the brass that I've collected from my last shooting session. We are going to put it into this tabletop vibratory tumbler. Has some corncob media in there, and we'll dump our brass in here. And we'll let it run for about 30 to 45 minutes and let it get nice and clean. And we'll be ready to start the reloading process. We'll put the lid on here. Make sure everything is secure. And fire it up. And we'll be back in about 45 minutes. Okay, it's been about 45 minutes, so we'll see how our brass is looking now. Take off the lid, and we'll pull some of these out. And they look nice and shiny. And so we'll go through and get these out of here and make sure all the corn cob is out, and get them ready, set up in our tray so we can begin the reloading process. Okay, we've got all our brass tumbled and out of the tumbler and put in our universal loading tray here so we can begin to start to work on it. One of the things I wanted to point out to you is you can use any type of brass for this purpose. You can use commercial. I happen to have a lot of milsurp ammo that I shoot, and the only thing I will caution you about by using the milsurp ammo is the primers are put into the milsurp ammo and have an additional ring pressed in so that the primers, I guess, don't come out during shipping or handling, as opposed to a commercial, which are just pressed in. So what this does, this adds some additional difficulty sometimes when you're removing the spent primer because of this extra area that's pressed in. It makes the primer more difficult to come out, and we have to actually do a second operation to open up the primer pocket to accept the new primer. So I will go through that process and show you how that works. Before we start to decap and size the brass, we need to install our die into the press. Okay, we have a size 2 shell holder, which actually comes with the die set from Lee. So we have the proper size die holder, shell holder, and the proper tool. And one other thing you must do when sizing and decapping is you must lubricate the brass. So I have this little plastic container that I use to lubricate, and I'll put a few in at a time. And I like to use this RCBS case slick. It's a spray bottle. I just need to spray the brass a little bit and roll it around, and it puts a nice amount of lubrication on the brass. Okay, put those back in our shell holder, back in our tray, and we will install one piece of brass into the press and remove the primer and size the case. Basically, you want to press this all the way down to the bottom, and the primer will be removed and the case will be sized. Now you notice with this particular one, my primer decapping pin got pressed up. This is a result of the military primers. The Lee dies have a safety in there so you do not break your pin. And if it meets too much resistance, it just slides up and allows you to reset it. So I will need to do that at this time. Just a matter of loosening it up, resetting it flush, and tightening it back. And then we'll give it another shot. Hopefully it'll press it out the rest of the way. Or not. And it has. Okay, I'm going to go through and deprime, decap, and resize the rest of this brass, and then we'll be back in a moment to do the next step. Okay, We have completed the decapping and resizing of 50 rounds, and what we're going to do now is, because this is the military surplus brass, in order for us to prepare to put the primers in, we need to swage the primer pockets. Because these rounds had the primers had an additional step to secure the primer pocket, or primer in the pocket, we need to open that back up in order to accept the new primer. So what I need to do is I need to change the tool in the press, and I will be using this RCBS primer pocket swager tool. And basically I need to replace the bottom shell holder with the proper size bottom, and then again install the top tool. And then in order to help remove, I have this extra little bar that I put in here in order to get the shell holder off, or get the shell off. Oh, there's one more piece that I need. This piece. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to put the brass and position it over the portion of the die and run it up. But this is a little bit more tedious than because you need to get it centered in the upper tool. Okay, and then it's a matter of just taking the press, bringing it all the way up, and then releasing it. And what that does is that opens up the pocket so that we can get the new primer in. So actually what I do is I hold the brass and get it started on the upper, bring the lower up to it, press it, and then release it. So I will go ahead and do that with the rest of the rounds, and then be back in a few moments to show you the next step. All right, we have all our primer pockets swaged and prepared to put in the rifle primers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change out the swaging tool now and put the number 2 shell holder back in, and change out the top tool to our crimp tool, and when we get ready to do that operation, okay, we have our crimp tool in and ready to go. One other thing that I like to do, just a personal preference of mine, before I start putting the primers in, is I have this small reamer tool that I just clean out any loose carbon deposits out of the primer pocket. Just make sure everything is clean inside of there, so that the primers seat properly. It's just a matter of putting it in there. It has a couple of has a small cutting edge on there, and just put it in and rotate it a few times around, back and forth. Loosens up any carbon deposits, and then tap the case. Make sure it's clean. So I'll go through and do that for all the 50 rounds that we have in the tray, and then we'll come back and we'll load some primers. We have all our primer pockets cleaned and we're ready to begin installing the primers. So what I'll do is I'll now take my Lee hand primer and take a box of 100 primers and make sure they're turned the right way so I don't dump them all over the floor. And basically it's just a matter of putting them in the hand primer and then giving a little shake so they all flip over in the right direction. It's always one that tends to be a little. So we can put our lid back on, and the primers feed down this little slot into the press, and with each depression of the handle we'll load a primer into the round. Sometimes I can get the first one started here. There. And the first one started. So basically it's a matter of, you also have a number 2 shell holder in the primer just like you have in your press. Basically just take the round, put it in, squeeze the handle, and now we have a primed piece of brass. Okay, basically we're just going to go through all of these in succession and install the new primers, and then we'll be ready for our final steps, which will be to load the powder and crimp the ends. So as you can see, it's a fairly simple process. Takes a little bit of hand pressure just to press these primers into the pockets. And we'll soon have 50 rounds ready to load powder and crimp. So we'll be back here shortly after I get the rest of these loaded up, and we'll continue on with our process. All right, we have our final round loaded and primed and ready for loading. So the next step and the final step will be to get the powder in our powder measure. Make sure it's dispensing 12 grains, which is the proper measurement for the rounds that I use of the red dot powder. And then we'll proceed to load each round and crimp it. So basically I have a pound of red dot powder here. I will fill my powder measure about 3/4 of the way. And what I usually do is I will dispense a few throws to make sure we have everything cycling properly. That way we make sure we have powder throughout the whole system. And then I will dispense one measure, check it on the scale. And looks like we're right at 12 grains. So we are ready to proceed. And again, what I do specifically for safety's sake is some people could possibly go through and load the powder in all the rounds and then crimp all the rounds. But for safety's sake, I prefer to load the powder into each round and then crimp it right away. And that way I make sure that I don't miss a round. I make sure I don't double load a round. So basically I will take a round, dispense the powder, and go right into my press. And crimp it closed. It will take some experimentation when you first set up your crimp round or your crimp die to make sure that it closes completely, but you don't have it set too tight so that it starts to bulge the case. I did have to experiment with that a little bit and close them up and tried them in my 03A3 to make sure that they chambered properly, and it did take some minor adjustment, not real hard to do. But you just want to make sure that you do that before you load them all up and run into a problem out in the field. Now, if you should do that, if you should set it and it's a little bit too low and it starts to bulge the case, you can fix that by taking your sizing die and taking the decapping pin out and running it back through the sizing die again, and it will reform the case back to the proper size so that it will chamber nice and easy. Fairly simple process to go through. None of this is hard. Just have to be attentive and make sure you do each step in its order and don't forget anything. And you should have a nice batch of successful rounds. We have now completed the loading of 50 rounds of blanks of 30-06. We have taken the entire process from start to finish, from case prep all the way through decapping and sizing, removal of the old primers, cleaning the primer pockets, swaging the primer pockets for milsurp ammo, and then putting the new primers in and loading with powder and crimping. You may wonder, okay, how long did this take and what kind of money is it going to save me? Well, good question. Once you get into doing this, have all your dies preset and able to change out and get a good rhythm going, you can do 50 rounds in about 30 minutes or so. As far as cost is concerned, I can go through the components that you're going to need and tell you what the cost is based on current, early 2014 prices. The Challenger press is about $99. Of course, this is not counting shipping and whatnot if you order online, but just regular retail price. Your set of dies, your 30-06 dies, about $35. Your swaging dies, also about $35. Your crimp die from CH Tool, about $90. Your hand primer tool, about $26. Powder scale, about $36. Powder dispenser, $31. Your brass basically is almost cost-free because you're reusing reloaded brass, or you're reusing, you know, brass that you've purchased live rounds and fired. You can buy once fired brass for about $30 a hundred. New brass is going to cost you about $1 a piece, and again, I don't think that's a smart idea to do. Your primers are going to cost you about $31 per thousand, if you can find them now. Your powder is going to cost you around $18 to $20 a pound, and you'll get about between 500 and 600 rounds out of a pound at 12 grains. So bottom line, in order to get set up, it's going to cost you roughly $400 for all these components to get set up and going. Using reloading or using reusing brass that you fired live, and counting the cost of the primers and the powder, it's going to cost you roughly 5 cents a round. So compare that to buying blanks pre-made. That's going to cost you somewhere between 40 and 50 cents a round. You know, if you do reload a fair amount, you'll definitely recoup the cost of the investment in your dies, and all the other components that go along with reloading. I appreciate your interest. I had several guys in my reenacting group and some other people that I know across the country that I've reenacted with in the past have expressed an interest in this, and that's why I'm doing this tutorial video. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me via email at artw@leadlifellc.com. That's artw@leadlifellc.com. Be happy to answer any questions that you may have, supply you with links to websites for purchasing these components, and anything else that I can help you with in regards to reloading your own blanks. Thanks again for your attention. Have a great day.
Commence firing. Fired will.